Hey guys, Brian here from the SEO Optimist, and today I want to talk about the December 2020 Google algorithm update. I haven't really weighed in a whole lot in the past on algo updates, and this seemed like a good one to start, primarily because Google hasn't been super forthright with what exactly they changed the last couple of changes, and people have reported some pretty significant changes in some ways of looking at it on this one. It's funny that some of the websites like Jim Harmon from Income School on their wonderful YouTube channel, they did a whole bunch of searching of their own of a whole bunch of different blog websites, small to large, and found that it was pretty split. 49% and 51% said their sites went down or went up, which at a glance you might be tempted to dismiss this whole thing and say, well, then it's 6 one half and as in the other. It doesn't really seem like a meaningful difference. When we look at what Search Engine Land found in their reporting, pretty significant change when you get to the top 3 results. That's almost a 20% difference in rankings that sites have noticed there. That is definitely worth taking a deeper look at when you wonder, well, it's gotten super competitive in the top 3 now, and a lot of sites that ranked either in the top 3 maybe don't at all anymore. A lot of what I've seen so far looking through this information seems like a continuity of their EAT upgrades that they've been doing. And of course that focuses largely on expertise and trust and authority of the author. So particularly in the health industry, if you're talking about health and wellness or fitness or diet, Google is paying a lot of attention to who are you as the author, and are you credible? Do you have credentials, or have you been published places in such a way that it's clear we should be listening to you? People should be trusting someone like yourself with their life or their money or their health. And those major categories have come under a lot of scrutiny. Similar for when you're talking finance or you're talking about money, you really more than ever now need to be backing up that you are an authority in that industry in order to rank. And if you can't, unfortunately, even if you create really good content that is interesting to read, legitimately makes a bunch of good points, maybe you are legitimately an authority in your industry and you write really good material, but the content is just going to have a really hard time ranking if you can't demonstrate that. I've seen that quite a bit myself. In the little bit of dabbling I've done in some of those industries, clients and even affiliate sites that I've tried to build have definitely struggled in the health industry because I myself am not a doctor. And so without doing a significant amount of personal authorship building, it can be tough to build that. One thing Jim Harmon drew attention to, and I was going to talk about this article anyway, Search Engine Land links to it in a broader discussion piece they did about if your site was negatively impacted by this change, here are some things that you can do. One area in particular Jim points out, we scroll down here to presentation and production questions. And he pointed out where it says, is the content mass-produced or outsourced to a large number of creators or spread across a large network of sites so that the individual pages or sites don't get as much attention or care? A lot of the data that he shared suggests that the people who were hit hardest by this were very large websites with tons of traffic, and he theorized that a lot of that is because when they get to that size, they're outsourcing a huge degree of the content that they're putting on the site, and so they tend to be a little bit more hands-off. You get into a kind of a cycle or a process where you just have a whole bunch of outsourced writers creating content, and you're just publishing it and moving each week, and there's not necessarily in the way that maybe a small business owner would be on their site editing pages, creating new pages, doing new landing pages, stuff like that. If they're not necessarily doing that on a regular basis, then it seems Google is kind of holding that against sites now. That is again another expansion, like I said a minute ago, of how they're gauging authority. They're now seeming to look at what are you doing on your site. It used to be a lot more simplistic, like are you making updates to your site on a monthly basis, and there were ways to kind of check that box, make it look like yeah, you are updating the site, and then it helps you rank. They're getting a lot more sophisticated now, and it seems like they've gotten much savvier on looking not only at what is on your site in terms of the pages, but how does that compare to last month, and are there issues, whether it's mobile friendliness or design flaws or typos or factual errors? Are there things that it noticed months ago that when it crawls the site again now, it continues to see as problems, and then that's now a negative sign to Google? You are not addressing these things. the site is not getting that personalized level of care, that costs you authority points. I'm not going to recommend you, it seems to say, to the degree that I did before because of that. Whereas sites that may not have ranked as well before but are consistently doing these things and doing a great job, in some cases the data is suggesting they're actually ranking better than they did, which is kind of a nice turnaround, because from what I've observed throughout the last quite a lot of updates, especially when there's searches related to shopping results, Google has always seemed to very much favor the big dogs. And it was very hard if you're a small e-commerce website, even if you're doing all the right things, ticking all the boxes for page optimization, writing good blog posts, etc., it just is very hard to rank competitively in an e-commerce space. And so I'm hoping from what we're seeing here that this is the beginning of what could be a lot more opportunity for smaller sites to meaningfully compete against those larger sites by demonstrating that they are on it and that they are authorities in this industry and they deserve a fair shake. Another thing I thought was interesting, and this may or may not be a new point from what they've made before, a lot of these points are ones that have been made in the past by Google, tells you questions to kind of ask yourself for your site if your rankings have gone down. But they mentioned, does the content have an excessive amount of ads that distract or interfere with the main content? I find this interesting because as much as they have said in the past that those types of spammy behaviors don't work, a lot of the times when I've done searches for things, sites that rank in the top 10, often above more, in my opinion, better content, tend to be those very clickbaity sites that make you click through like 7 or 15 pages to get through basically one article, and each of them is loaded with ads. And so in the past I've kind of been like, Google can say whatever it want about, this is not the kind of stuff we're looking for, this is not going to rank. Well, it does rank, and it often outranks much more deserving content. So hopefully when they say this now, they're going to be serious about it and they're going to crack down much more. Not that I'm saying sites that have ads shouldn't rank. I mean, I have sites with ads. That's where ad revenue comes from for creating your content. It's a fair take for what you're putting out there. But there are obviously sites that just use very extravagant titles to get clicks, don't really provide much value, and 90% of what you're seeing on the page are ads. I think we can all agree we'd like to see a little bit less of that. I like to see this one here. If the content draws on other sources, does it avoid simply copying or rewriting those sources and instead provide substantial additional value and originality? What I glean from that is it's nice to be able to reference other stuff, but what a lot of sites seem to do is they'll lean on somebody else's expertise by referencing them, but then they'll just paraphrase whole paragraphs of that site's content. And so Google kind of looks at that article and says, well, if you're basically saying the same thing as the other guy and you're even referencing them as more knowledgeable than you, why should I rank you and not just them? And so much like essay writing, where you're bringing in points made by other authors, other books, etc., you're bringing in examples, you need to unpack that and discuss it and analyze it a bit and share with the reader what can they do with that information. What does that mean to them? Is the site that you're referencing making good points, but maybe they didn't delve into those things with this context quite the way that you're doing, and so what you're discussing is really meaningful in that way. It seems like something that they're looking at more and more now. So definitely my advice for anyone blogging for SEO in mind, definitely make sure as you are linking to reference sites, you're always asking yourself, am I just using this for credibility, or they make a specific point, or they share a specific piece of data or a fact, a number that I want to incorporate, but then I'm drawing conclusions from that and using that as part of a larger and more complex point? Or when I look back on some of my content, can I see where some of it was just either hastily thrown together or a little superficial, if I'm honest about it, where maybe I've just leaned too much on the things they've said and I haven't really said a whole lot myself, other than stringing along a whole bunch of link examples of other people's points. If when you look at some of your content and you're honest with yourself, you can see where that's the case, you might be able to get some nice ranking boost just by, instead of writing new content this month, maybe say, I'm going to spend some time each week going back over posts that I've done before where I can see that that's a problem. Posts with the most outbound links, and asking myself each time I'm referencing a point that somebody else made, what can I really dig into about that? Even if it requires some time. If you don't have the answer right away, cool. Spend 15 or 20 minutes jotting out some notes and thinking about it. Ask some other people in your industry what they make of some of the content that you're referencing and get some ideas. How can you unpack that? How can you provide some additional value about that? Quick example. Let's stick with the health and wellness industry that we were talking about earlier. So say that you are writing an article about getting fit and putting on muscle with strength training exercises, and say that you referenced a couple other authoritative fitness websites that gave you stats like using these supplements and doing these exercises can improve the rate at which you put on muscle by 38%, and say that you used that stat and you linked to them referencing that. But then pretty much you just moved on to other information that a lot of these sites have already said. Do you have an anecdotal story? Are you doing some of these exercises as well? If so, that would be a great point in your article after you reference the 38% to either agree or disagree with it. Say, I've been following this regimen very strictly in the last 60 days myself, and I can say, in whichever way it is, if you agree with it, say, yeah, I know that's pretty consistent with my experience. I've done XYZ things like it mentions, and I too have noticed roughly a 38% improvement. Or be contrary. If that's not been your experience, I think the users would find that really helpful for you to say, look, I'm not knocking this authority. I'm sure that a lot of the time this has been consistent in things that I found. But for me, unfortunately, when I have done all of the things they talk about here, I plateaued out, or I only noticed a 12% difference, not 38. And so for me, unfortunately, it's not been the same, or whatever. Anything that you could add into the article to make it more yours, to make it not something that's been said 100 times elsewhere, those are simple ways to do it. Telling your own story, using your own anecdotal examples. I have noticed in the past better metrics on click-throughs and time on page when we've done those kinds of things as well. And if that now is something Google is looking at harder than ever, definitely something I recommend to you guys then, that you take a look at your content and ask those kinds of questions. All right, that's all I really have to say on this for now. I'm going to keep doing some digging, and if I think of more things to say, I'll do a follow-up video to this, but hopefully this was helpful to you guys for the month of December as you're thinking about your content. And like I said, if your site has noticed a diminishment in your rankings, these are some of the hot things to look for improvement. Catch you guys in the next video.